Hey friends. So I watched the Disney Pixar movie Soul last night for the second time at least. I've seen it before. I don't know that I've seen it more than once until yesterday. And I put it on so that Annalise could see it. And it was one of those nights where we started the movie and I thought we would watch maybe 30 minutes of it because it was actually kind of getting towards bedtime. And then we just couldn't stop watching it. And she loved it. I loved it again. I was reminded of how much I had loved it the first time I saw it. And if you haven't seen it, I don't care how old you are, I don't care if you have kids or not, you should definitely watch this movie, Disney Pixar's Soul. It's a beautiful story and a kind of a beautiful message for a movie that I've never really seen put into narrative like this, where the conclusion is something along the lines of, this shouldn't spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but it's something along the lines of the notion of a purpose, the notion of our life's purpose, or our thing in life, is kind of a misguided notion. It's generally taking us off track. And readiness to live, being ready to be fully alive and experience life, is the ultimate point of life. It's not that we have a purpose that we have to fulfill. It's that we get to be here and have these experiences. And there was something really great for me to receive in that. Again, there was a kind of lightness to it. And it reminded me, funny enough, I think my post yesterday, I was speaking about some Sadhguru video or other where he talks about if you need to really understand that there's almost no value to your mental thoughts, to what the mind does. There's no life value to it. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't have utility. Doesn't mean it's not essential for living a fulfilled life. It doesn't mean that the mind is not at all important. It just means there's no inherent value to our thoughts. And which I think, Sadhguru emphasizes this, not to diminish the capacities of the human mind, but to remind those of us, which is most of us, who are kind of trapped in the mind and enslaved by our own mind, that ultimately the mind is dealing in recycled material. It's dealing in past impressions, past complexes of thought that are being reviewed in our mind's eye. And this, so something about the way that that Soul, the movie, speaks to a liberation from the obsession with purpose, felt very related to that. It felt like the next logical thing for me to hear, or for me to sort of integrate. It was really fun. And it was really fun to have Annalise watch this movie and enjoy the twists and turns of it and really kind of follow it. There's a fair amount going on. It deals with sort of metaphysical planes of existence and portraying things in this way, and it does a really good job. And because if a 4-year-old, 5-year-old can pretty much follow it, I think you've told a good story. The other thing that really inspired me about it, and I didn't realize this, I think I remembered this, I sort of had the recollection that I had this insight after watching it the first time, but it's a film that essentially doesn't have an antagonist. It's a successful kind of hero's journey dramatic arc without an antagonist, where the antagonist is each character's and the protagonists in particular's lack of self-knowledge is the antagonist. Our own lack of self-knowledge is the antagonist. And I've talked for the last probably couple months about this book that I've been rereading about how we make meaning through narrative, and I've just been it's a well-worn path in my mind now, looking at all the different ways in which stories, our meaning-making template, and this book makes a case that we would do well to question what role we are playing within the hero's journey and the various narratives that kind of form the substrate of meaning for our lives. But suffice it to say that a story that compellingly and convincingly and totally narratively successfully manages to create a hero's journey where there's no external antagonist is an awfully good and I think healthy reference point for right now, for people right now, because I would argue that that's the nature of our lives right now, the journey that we're at, this place in history, this time in history. I would argue that the most formidable antagonist we are likely to face in the West, in a privileged society, at a certain level of privilege, perhaps, that internal lack of self-awareness, lack of self-knowledge, whether that is egoic fixation, whether it's obsession with something that sort of disconnects us from the heart of life. That's the biggest thing we're likely to face. There are people out there who face actual antagonists. There are wars. There are people whose land is being invaded. There are places where other narratives are still highly relevant and where the notion of an internal antagonist would be considered something of a luxury. But in my life and in the lives of those with whom I interact, there's a sense that the biggest issue we have is we're in our own way. There's a great video of Sadhguru where he gets asked, he said, a woman asks him, this advice that you give and this stuff that you talk about really seems relevant to, how can you focus so much on this kind of spiritual work when there are people who are hungry, people who are starving, so many people who are suffering just fundamental needs, lack of fundamental needs to stay alive. And he says, well, first of all, I do programs with people who who suffer those needs. And so he says, this advice is not for people who are either hungry or unhoused or unemployed, or what he says. I want to heal the people whose stomachs are full. When you have an empty stomach, you have one problem. If you have a full stomach, all of a sudden you have 100 problems, right? And I think this is the blessing and the curse of living in a privileged society, or being a privileged member of society, is that our problems seem to multiply because the things that would actually be significant survival level problems don't really crop up on our radar that often. That's not our moment to moment daily experience. So there's this way. So he's basically saying, look, we got to fix the people whose tummies are full, because they're the ones actually both causing a lot of the problems, and with the resources and the levers of power to potentially fix these problems. And right, that comes back to this notion of like an internal antagonist, that the biggest thing to overcome if we want to help make a better world is our own lack of self-knowledge, lack of self-awareness, obsession with whatever thing we're obsessed with for weird psychological reasons that might, for our, not weird necessarily, but like our own psychological proclivities that make us need to seek a certain kind of affirmation or a certain kind of identity through a certain kind of work or a certain kind of success, a certain kind of affirmation. That's what's in our way. That's certainly what's in my way. So this all just kind of came together as I was watching the movie last night and then reflecting on it a little bit. And it's really, I have to say, when the movie was over, I was like, wow, it's like watching somebody pull off a new, never before tried gymnastics move, writing a story with no antagonist, and it's clearly a hero's journey story. And it's 100% success, to the point where you don't even notice. I didn't even notice it until my mind was analyzing after the fact and going, wait, that's kind of cool. So anyway, check out Disney Pixar's Soul, and let's all get over our own internal lack of self-knowledge. That's my pronouncement for the day. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate you. Have a great day. I'll see you soon.